Welcome everyone to the Launching and Growing Your Career and Sustainability webinar that is being hosted by NASPA's Sustainable Development Goals Committee. I want to thank Olga Smirnova and Nick Angela for helping me co-organize this webinar, and I'm pleased to have all of you joining us today. My name is Wee Youssef. I'm a professor in the School of Public Service here at Old Dominion University. And I'm pleased to welcome two of our panelists, Michelle Covey and Michael Cahill. So I will be the moderator for the discussion, and I've given our panelists some of those questions ahead of time. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So if they could please introduce themselves and give some background about their career paths in sustainability. I've asked them, kind of given them a lot of leeway to talk about a range of topics and issues regarding how they've gotten to their careers in sustainability. So Michelle, we'll go with you first and then Michael.
Certainly. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Covey. I am right now at University of Georgia. My position is the Coastal Resilience DoD, that is Department of Defense, liaison, which is a unique position with University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. And I guess I'll get to that in a moment, what that all means. But just to kind of my background, I have a bachelor's degree from University of Georgia in biology and geology, and a master's degree from University of Georgia in zoology, marine science. So I started out kind of looking at sort of large scale environment type of things. And then when I went to do my master's degree, as many people do, I focused in very narrowly and did ecology work in the salt marshes here in Georgia. And so I actually spent most of my time studying sort of marine science and population dynamics at Sapelo Island, where there's a University of Georgia Marine Institute there. And then for my PhD, which I have a gap in between that I'll talk about, but between my master's and my PhD, there was about 15 years. And for my PhD, I was at East Carolina University, and the program I did there was the coastal 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 Resources Management program, which I think now is called Coastal Sciences. They've changed the name on it a little bit. But it was a science and policy type of program. So I've always been really drawn to interdisciplinary topics, as you can tell. I think in order to really, I was always very passionate about understanding the world and understanding problems. I definitely was attracted to understanding what was going on in our world. And one of the struggles I really had in doing that and in my educational progress was I really didn't know anybody who did the kinds of things I wanted to do. My parents and the folks that I went to school with, my parents' friends and things like that, were all in medical fields, legal fields, business fields, and I didn't feel like that really fit me very well. But I was really passionate about the environment, the world, like how can we make a better place for people and for the other beings that inhabit our world as well. So it was a little bit difficult for me as I was trying to narrow down my choices. I had a really hard time because I kept studying the whole world and everything in it. But I do think that was a good grounding in that. But as I got into more of the specific work in my master's degree, and I started to really study the world in kind of an isolated place, I came to significantly understand that when you're managing environments, you're really managing people, and I needed to do more about people. So at any rate, when I kind of took a pause on my education, and I ended up out in away from the marine environment in central Illinois, where I was like, well, what am I going to do here? And I was doing some teaching. I was teaching community college and those kinds of things, because of course that's what I learned when I was in my education as a student, assistant teacher, or even as an undergraduate. I was an assistant teacher, and but I decided to walk into a nonprofit and say, what do you do? Is this a place I want to be? And that ended up with me being the executive director of that nonprofit. So it was a small environmental education nonprofit. And they ended up having a shift where they needed a executive director that could sort of redesign what they were doing. And they had contracts teaching recycling education to schools across their county. And so I was working very closely. These contracts were with the county government and then two city governments. So I started to understand what local government was all about, which was something I didn't get in my education at all. And started to realize like how essential local government is, and how important public policy is to making that difference in the world. So when I ended up going back I moved and left that job and was at East Carolina, and then I was like, what I want to do is take all of that coastal work that I love and I can do again, and how can I match that up with this public policy? And as the emerging issue, I tried to run away from it, but the emerging issue was climate change. And so I started to say, well, sea level rise is starting to impact our coast. Nobody's talking about it yet. Maybe I should see, how we can best talk about it. So I ended up doing my dissertation, talking to people about what sea level rise means, what they understood it to be. And then that directly led to me working with Sea Grant. I ended up with we at Old Dominion University and Virginia Sea Grant, and really using a lot of those communication skills with both the public and also businesses, leaders, public officials, all those kinds of folks, to try to contribute to that movement. As I'm sure many of you know, Hampton Roads being sort of ground zero for sea level rise, it was a perfect place for me to be. And also being a Department of Defense community led me directly into my next job, which is here at University of Georgia, where I'm working directly with the Office of the Secretary of Defense programs that are trying to nationally work with making sure to have compatible uses with areas around their bases, and have resilience both with their installations and with the communities that support their installations. So I think I hit everything there. I want to make sure I'm not talking too long, so I can come back to some of that, but I want to give Michael a chance too.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Michelle. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Michael Cahill. I am the Climate Resiliency and Sustainability Planner for the town of Plymouth. I know it's a very long title. I'll get a little bit more into what that means later. But I actually grew up in Plymouth, so I didn't make it too far. I got my undergrad up north of Boston at Endicott College, where I studied environmental science, and I minored in business administration. And to kind of follow up on one of the threads that Michelle pulled there, I always knew I wanted to do some type of science, but I wasn't really sure where I fit in and where the place was. Um, I ended up graduating from high school probably 15 years ago now. But when I graduated, even back then, there weren't a lot of options when it comes to environmental science. I got my start, I took an online oceanography course. I think there were about 15 students spread out across the country. And that was really the first time that I knew that there was paths for me to go, have different avenues within scientific fields, within oceanography or marine sciences that I could, have a career. So from there, I think it's important to always, I do a lot of work with the high schools, just showing different career paths, and especially when it comes to sustainability and climate resiliency. There's such a need for, improving the workforce and getting more skilled people in this field to help solve problems. So I think it's very important just to show different career avenues. Um, so I ended up graduating from Endicott College, where I focused in fisheries, mainly in restoration. I ended up coming to work for the town of Plymouth right after I graduated. My background really helped me with river restoration projects, specifically dam removal projects. I'm happy to say that Plymouth is one of the leaders in the country when it comes to dam removal projects. We've removed 13 dams to improve ecological passage for fisheries, but also to help mitigate the effects of climate change over a 20-year period. After that, I decided to go back to school, where I went to UMass Dartmouth to get my graduate degree. I studied public policy. My old professor, Nikolai Angeloff, is actually here with us today. Nick and I, we worked together on my graduate thesis. We ended up getting it published. But when I was at UMass Dartmouth, I really fell in love with the field of ecological economics, excuse me. And really, the goal of ecological economics is to ascertain the value of healthy ecosystems and what they provide to us, both in non-market and in market senses. From there, our graduate research focused in using housing prices, residential housing prices, as a proxy for consumer marginal willingness to pay for varying degrees of environmental quality. We'll talk about this a little bit later on, but on the local level, you really need to sell projects through a different lens, and being able to have some ecological economic data to prove, overall benefit. It goes a long way in getting projects completed. Then in 2021, the town of Plymouth declared a climate emergency. From that declaration, my position was created, the Climate Resiliency and Sustainability Planner. It was also what kicked off the creation of the town's first Climate Action Adaptation Plan, which was adopted and it was completed and adopted by the Select Board 1 year ago. Within that plan, we took a whole of government approach to climate change. And really, the best way to describe the Climate Action Adaptation Plan is a roadmap for the Plymouth for the next 15 to 20 years, outlining ways that we can reduce risk associated with the physical impacts of climate change, while also capitalizing on the opportunities afforded by climate change. I think it's a very common adage to say that climate change poses a severe threat to our daily lives. But I think it's often understood or undersold the opportunity that it provides us to rebuild our infrastructure and our society in a way that maximizes utility for our residents and promotes equity within our communities. So within that plan, there are 62 priority actions. That's really my job description. It's enough to keep me busy for probably the rest of my career. But within there are 5 areas of focus: waste, transportation, buildings, energy and infrastructure, natural systems, and health, safety, and preparedness. So it really touches every function of municipal government. And my role is to work with every department and division in town to help prepare for climate change and improve sustainability in town. So I kind of wear a bunch of different hats. I'm really a jack of all trades, moving in between different departments, helping out with their goals. And it's a very interesting role, and there's a lot of opportunity to learn a lot of new things. And then additionally, I'll also mention I am an adjunct professor at Endicott College, where I teach corporate sustainability within their MBA program, working with business students to talk about corporation strategy and ways that you can implement sustainable initiatives in there to provide benefits for the business, the employees, and improve brand awareness.
All right. So, as you probably heard from the panelists, there are a lot of different facets to a career in sustainability, which is, I think, what makes it, and as they explain a lot really interesting, from wanting to learn more about the world, the environment, and what's going on in the world and the environment, to all kind of topics like economics and willingness to pay. So, a lot of cool things that people can do in careers um, in sustainability. So, kind of building and launching off of that excitement and interest and doing all kinds of different things, what has been the most rewarding aspects of your sustainability careers and what excites you about your work? And we'll let Michael go first.
Yeah. So what's great about the local level ecosystem services? So the value that ecosystems provide us as humans, um, they're extremely localized at their core. So the closer you are in proximity to an ecosystem service that's provided by a healthy habitat, the more value that you'll attain. I think typically when people, they want to focus on state and federal level just because, you can make more of an impact. But I think really when you're on that level, you're really looking down from 10,000 feet. You see the overall impact of the project, but you don't get to see the direct impact to the constituents and the residents that live in the area. What's great about my job is after a project's completed, I actually get to see the tangible benefits that those people get to experience in their lives. So a good example of this one, we're working on a downtown resiliency project, which is redesigning 3,000 linear feet in Plymouth's historic downtown area. For those of you that don't know what an urban heat island is, this is our most severe urban heat island in town. And the area is covered by what we call gray infrastructure, so asphalt, concrete, surfaces that absorb heat. Additionally, we have a lot of tall buildings in that area, and it restricts airflow. So not only is heat attracted to this area, but it's really retained there and isn't able to escape. There was a study conducted in Boston in 2022 where they looked at urban heat islands in severe areas in Boston, in areas that had some mitigation done. They were able to show temperature swings of 7.5 degrees Celsius in those areas. So it's significant. This area in our downtown area is our most severe urban heat island in town, but it also abuts two environmental justice communities. So people that have less economic mobility to maybe pay for rising prices of electricity and offset the heat with air conditioning. So the best way to mitigate urban heat island is through the use of nature-based solutions, plantings of trees and vegetation in that area. They have an ecosystem service known as evapotranspiration, which is just a fancy scientific word of saying that they cool off those areas and provide shade cover. There was actually a study that was done in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts, where 30% of the tree canopy cover was taken down in the city as a result of a tree disease. The following summer, they were able to show that electricity prices for those homes that were directly in that area went up 25%. So by planting trees in that area, we'll be providing ecosystem service benefits, mitigating urban heat island effect. Also, there's a huge benefit to local businesses and shop fronts, attracting people in the downtown area by improving aesthetics. And there will be stormwater capture benefits as well. So all of those, like I said, people will be directly abutting and will be directly benefited by that project. And it's really cool to be able to see, directly the impact on people's lives in the surrounding community when we complete a project.
Well, and I'm kind of on the other end of this. I'm often involved in more in the larger types of projects, and some of the most rewarding things, one of the things that I've been involved with lately that is really rewarding is an effort to preserve and conserve 1 million acres of salt marsh along the East Coast that we call the South Atlantic Salt Marsh. And so this is the extent of salt marsh that goes all the way from North Carolina to northern Florida. Georgia has about a third of that. I think it's the largest amount of salt marsh of any state besides Louisiana. And It's something that we really are very focused on conserving and have a lot of good policies around conserving. And we're trying to work across these 4 states. And this is something that actually arose from a Department of Defense coalition that is working together with other federal agencies like Fish and Wildlife, national parks, NOAA Fisheries, all these other agencies, Army Corps of Engineers, all these different agencies are all working together, kind of pulling together to look at how sea level rise is going to affect these marshes. I mean, the difficulty with marshes responding is that very often the just behind the salt marsh is developed and people are living there. And so they have this phenomenon called coastal squeeze, where the salt marshes might come up if they're not allowed to migrate, we'll basically lose them. And they have so many ecosystem services, as Michael was talking about, ecosystem services of the forestry or the urban forestry. Same thing with the salt marshes. They're providing habitat and resilience to storms and all these different things. So bringing those groups together and coordinating their working together. We have state implementation teams in every state that are NGOs. I mean, it works across this gamut, and trying to get us all to kind of pull together and elevate the effort is something that I've been working on, that I've found so rewarding. And I have to say that for me, it's also one of the most rewarding aspects is getting to work with such wonderful people. I mean, across the board, the people that you work with in your career are people that you would like to hang out with, are people that have similar values that you do, that are helping to it, it's adding value, like 2 + 2 = 5, right? Because you're working together to have greater value with the sum of the parts being larger. So anyway, I think generally, I mean, there are exceptions, but generally you have very collaborative people, and working together with those people, it feeds your heart as well as your brain.
So Michelle, I would build off of that. I think also a career in sustainability is one where like you see the impact of the work that you do, either in terms of policies that are then implemented or projects on the ground that actually make a difference in the communities. And so those are also the things that kind of feed and nourish and sustain your career over the long term, where we might be working in environments where you might be fighting an uphill battle when it comes to environmental issues or climate impacts and things like that. So it's also, I think, the rewards of seeing the impacts of the work that you do that also sustains you in this career path. So to transition to the maybe not so glamorous, maybe not so fun part of these careers, what challenges have you faced, and how did you overcome these challenges? Michael is nodding, so I'm going to let him nod his answers away. Let's go.
Sure. Yeah. So on the local level, not super different, I don't think, from state or federal, but something that we definitely deal with here is the limited resources that we have. When it comes to local expenditures of funding, there's a clear understanding of a lot of projects. Say if it's there's potholes in the street, they need to be filled, or there's improvements that need to be made to a public safety building, either police or fire, or a school building. Those are all fairly simple, I think, for communities to wrap their heads around. Projects that have climate resiliency aspects and adaptation, those are a little bit farther down the road, and the benefits associated with them are less obvious to residents. Within my graduate program, Professor Angeloff always used the expression that the best policies are built on strong scientific, economic, and social data. And that's something that I try to use on every project that I work on. So for in 2025, a project having a strong scientific background isn't enough to sell it on a public level. We need to look at the economic and the social pieces as well. Um, so, for example, I think a good example of this one would be a dam removal project that we're working on. It might make an improvement to habitat and allow additional fish to get upstream, but when we're talking about a large expenditure of funding, we need to sell it through a different lens. So, say, we've with a 100-year storm event at this site, the dam would, dropping 7.5 inches of water in a 24-hour period, the dam would overtop by 1 inch. There are 48 residential properties and commercial properties immediately downstream. If those were to go down, the town would have a financial risk of, let's just say, $4 million. Additionally, there's annual maintenance that needs to be conducted on this dam every year. By removing it, we'll remove that maintenance cost. We'll be allowing fish upstream, which provide direct forage for species that are commercially and recreationally significant, which provide $3 million in gross economic output for the town per year. So it's just selling projects through a different lens. There's aesthetic and trail improvements that'll be part of the project as well. So really, you have to be creative when it comes to selling projects, when it comes to limited funding that you face.
So I was thinking about this a little differently. And one of the challenges, I think I was thinking of like a personal challenge. And I mean, this might be hard to tell, but I'm actually an introvert. And I think that that's a real challenge for me as I faced in my career. And I guess to kind of overcome this challenge, I guess what I've done is try to take advantage of things that allow me to understand that, best, the different professional development opportunities that have come my way. Sea Grant has this thing called Sea Grant Academy, where many of the extension folks can get together and support each other, and we did like Myers-Briggs and that kind of thing, to kind of understand ways to talk to different people and appeal to different people, and through that, that's one of those opportunities to kind of understand how different people might react to different things. So I think, sort of leaning into your strengths that you do have, and then understanding where your own limitations are, and overcoming those, to me is one of the big challenges. And then sort of along the same lines, maybe as Michael was talking, I was reflecting on politics. And when I was in North Carolina and initially starting to talk about sea level rise, this was a time frame when they actually outlawed sea level rise. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was on Stephen Colbert and all that. And so kind of that, although it wasn't necessarily a challenge, for me, because it was actually quite interesting to write about in my dissertation, it was quite a challenge for some of my colleagues that were, the folks that were in the coastal management program there. Like, how do we make our world a safer place when our state, when there are these disinformation campaigns, which is really what it was, at play, and that is a huge challenge. And I think what you need to do, and again, it's not easy, it's something that they had to persist through, is to they kind of took a step back and thought about how they could communicate the challenge, and how do you really get to the shared values that whether it's safety values, risk values, starting to talk to people about what this means in terms of sort of the dollar values, as Michael was talking about later down the line. So yeah, political headwinds are a difficult challenge that you have to kind of address in a holistic way. Um, Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I don't know.
We can definitely talk about different topics later and also maybe in the Q&A. But I think the point that you brought up about the legislation in North Carolina, I think also speaks a little bit to what Michael was talking about more the business interests, because the NC20 group in North Carolina was very much aligned with more the business concerns against climate change and sea level rise. So being able to speak in the economics language that businesses might better understand, I think also goes a little bit I don't know necessarily in the North Carolina 2020, 2011, 2012 environment, being able to speak the big business language, but I think being able to speak different languages in a sense to resonate with the different audiences is another something else that I think could help you advance in your sustainability career. So, um, Michelle talked a little bit about professional development and kind of leaning into your strengths and understanding your weaknesses. So what advice would you offer, additional advice that you would offer to someone who is beginning their career in sustainability? Michelle, you want to take a stab
Sure.
at that one?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think is so valuable, if you can do it, is taking advantage of things like internships or short-term work opportunities. Part of that is to develop a network, but also it gives you a chance to sort of try out things that you may, to kind of see rather than starting a job and quitting a job and having that on your resume, doing a short-term, internship. There are just so many ways that you can learn from that. And so many options. And really there's being a student, you're in the ideal situation to take advantage of those kinds of opportunities. I don't think there's a time in your life when there's more opportunities for you laid out to try some things in different offices. It a lot of times it is really hard to find the perfect job, and you may have in the back of your mind, oh, okay, I want to be Michael Cahill one day, right? This is the job I want. Maybe he's already got Plymouth, but maybe I can do it, in my community or something like that. And that may be possible. Or, if you're really passionate about something, you often can kind of even sort of, make your own opportunities as well. And I've heard of people doing that and seen that people have done that. And one of the places I would encourage people to try is NGOs like that. Like I said, in my career, that was one way that I really was able to launch into a 9-year job as an executive director of a not-for-profit, was just to walk in the door and say, hey, what do you need? What can I help you out with? If you don't necessarily have that kind of time, you could try to get to know the NGO, and maybe you can do a smaller volunteer, or maybe you would be good for a board or a committee that they're doing, or that kind of thing. Again, growing your network, and trying different things and seeing how different things work. Similarly, you could do this maybe on a local board as well, to kind of see how, the local parks board or greenways board or those kinds of things that you might be interested in. And so that kind of, volunteer work, in my mind, is not just, service. The service is wonderful, but it's also, professional development and helping you to build your people that so that when those openings do happen, Michael goes to Boston or whatever, then you then you can come in and maybe you're the next person in line for that job. So that's at least a few ideas I have.
Yeah, and that's great. And Michelle, you queued me up perfectly here. So I'm actually a product of an internship. So when I was an undergrad, I did 3 internships. Like you said, I was able really to figure out exactly what I liked. It was, you can dip your toe in the water, figure out which aspects of certain jobs are best, what level you might like to be at. So I did one with an NGO, one with the federal government, and one with the local government, actually the town of Plymouth. I was able to make a connection here at the town, continue to keep my foot in the door. Eventually, when a position opened up, I applied. I already had the relationships in place, and they knew my work ethic and the products that I was able to provide. So I can't speak highly enough for the internship process. And then to pull on another thread that Michelle mentioned, I think at this point in time, one advice that I would give to someone that's interested in coming into the sustainability field or the climate resiliency field is not to be deterred if you get pushback or if you fail. So you're going to get pushback, you're going to fail. Unfortunately, at this point in time, sustainability and climate resiliency are both two very politically charged words. There's a huge need for us to make movement in this space, but it's not obvious. It's not right now the easiest area to make a lot of headway. Um, One thing that I always try to do when I do get pushback is talk to the person that has an issue, see exactly where that issue is and see if you can use sustainability or an aspect of the project to help solve that concern. I think typically, when we're dealing with someone that might have some pushback, they see sustainability as an additional thing that they need to do or an additional roadblock that keeps them from getting their projects done. When a lot of times, this really gives us an opportunity to help with, the project they're working on and solve it through a different lens. So I always think it's important to have those soft skills and those communication skills, build relationships with people that you're working with, understand where their hesitation is, and see if you can come up with some creative solutions to help problem solve them.
So I'm going to kind of ask a follow-up question since we're talking kind of about internships. One of the suggestions was to think about internships. Do you have any advice in terms of picking the right internship or approaching the organization for an internship? How to just even, I think some of our students might be saying, well, I think an internship's a great idea, but how do I even get started?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a end all be all answer for this. I was just persistent. I showed up places. I made phone calls. I think it's always best to have in-person visits or phone calls rather than just emails. I think emails are a little bit impersonal, and people don't automatically respond to them. If you're there, you show that you're committed, you're willing to be there, and you care about these issues in person or on the phone. I think that goes a little bit farther. So my approach was, get out there, do the legwork, meet the people. And I think it's a lot harder to, turn someone down once they, have that face-to-face connection with you and they've met you before.
If you have the flexibility to live in another place or go another, there are the internships and fellowships. Like I would recommend, look at Sea Grant if you're a coastal person, because there are a number. There's the Canals Fellowship. I know so many people that did a year Canals Fellowship and got either a federal government job or a similar type of job that really set them up well, and that's a year at a federal agency or in the legislative branch in DC. Or many of the states also have similar types of fellowship programs in their state. So work for a state agency, work for an NGO. I know we here in Georgia have that. So it's a fellowship. It's a paid position as a starter, but it's a time limited position. But they sometimes leverage them into employment, and a lot of those folks, like our coastal zone program here in Georgia, looks at those people as tryouts to see if they like them, and a lot of times they end up staying. So yeah, I think there are I know when I was there, when I was in college, I did a summer internship, in the national parks. I didn't end up in the national parks, but my best friend who did a similar fellowship, she had a whole career. She just retired from I guess a 25 or 30-year career in the National Park Service. Ended up being a superintendent and everything. So yeah, I mean, you never know where it'll go, I guess.
Great, thanks for that. So that last question was about those who wanted to begin their careers in sustainability, but this next one kind of transitions to, are there any specific skills or knowledge that have helped you advance and grow your career in sustainability? And then how would you recommend students and others develop these skills or knowledge? And Michelle, if you want to just keep rolling.
Okay, I'll keep rolling. But I think Michael already said, to me, communication is number one. If you can, those kinds of skills are useful no matter what you do. So being a good writer helps you whatever kind of job you end up doing, knowing how to write clearly. Even if it's just emails, it is so important to have those kinds of skills, being a careful speaker and being a good listener. I mean, the listening part, especially when you're working with communities and even any kind of constituencies, really, but really, listening and being able to distill the main points and synthesize all of those skills are really, really important. And you often get these in your classes. I think you guys that are professors do a really good job at getting your students to practice these speaking and writing skills for sure. But also if you don't have access to that, there's groups like Toastmasters or, to help with practicing speaking skills and that kind of thing. And then on the technical side, and Michael may be able to speak to this more than I can, but GIS skills, analytic skills are so valuable for all the reasons that he already said. So I'm gonna hand this over to him because I think that he's probably got more on that than I do.
Yeah, so I don't have particular programs or anything like that. I think it's just helpful to be a sponge in this field. Things are changing so quickly, so don't be afraid to chase down something that you might be interested in. A multidisciplinary field like climate change, there's 1,000 different ways that you could take a career in sustainability, and there's a bunch of different things to focus on. So if there's something that really interests you, don't be afraid to find someone that's an expert in that field and work with them, to learn more about it. A good example, I do quite a bit of work with economic development. My background in undergrad wasn't in business. When I started this job, I realized very early on that when it comes to climate change adaptation, there's really only small things that we can do on the local level. When it comes to large scale mitigation, is working with innovative companies that have solutions and technologies that can help us mitigate climate change on a large global scale. So really, I worked with economic development to start working with startups in that field, that have some solutions in clean technology. And I'm happy to say over the 4 years that I've been working with economic development, we've now been able to put in pilot programs for 7 companies, 7 startups that have some type of innovative solution in climate change, that are providing environmental benefits to our residents while also providing high-paying jobs. So there's a million different ways you can go. I don't think there's one program that's really going to help you out. But I always think it's helpful to find a mentor or find an expert in some aspect that you're trying to learn, and learn everything that you can from them to help you make some headway.
All right. So I think that was the last of my prepared questions for our panelists, but I did want to just give the two of you an opportunity. Is there anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you wanted to add to the conversation? Please, some final comments, final thoughts?
Um, I'll just say, I know that sustainability and climate change can be a little tough right now, just in terms of global or a national perspective. I tend to be optimistic. I think, if we have a lot of people that are, talented and dedicated in this field working on it, we can still make a difference. And I just think it's always important to reiterate that. I know a lot of people come away from, discussions on climate change, and they're a little bit doom and gloom. I always like to end it on, kind of a higher note that if we work together, we still have time to, reverse and mitigate some of the impacts that we're going to see.
Oh, I agree. Like, to work in climate change, you sort of have to be an optimist and find joy in life, because that's you know otherwise it's too depressing. You go home every day depressed. So yeah, so taking care of yourself and making sure that you feel, joy with yourself, is so important, and nurturing whatever you need to nurture there. Um so and I'll say that, at least what I'm seeing right now, I mean, there are certainly, individuals that are being really impacted, by the new administration. But at the same time, there are lots of pivots that are happening too. So even if you don't see the word climate, they're doing the same work. So, both of those things are true. I do feel very strongly, that there are a number of people who have either, decided to retire or quit or whatever, because, and that's a huge loss to the federal government in particular. Losing that, brain trust and all of that experience is a huge loss. But many of the programs are figuring out ways to persist, so it's not gone.
So while our audience thinks of questions, I was just going to pose one question. Michelle, you had talked about collaborating and coordinating, and that how a lot of the work that you do, you don't do just by yourself. And so what are some of the things that you feel have made your work in that type of collaborative environment more successful?
Yeah, I guess what, sort of, I don't know whether it comes natural to me, or I've learned it from observing, probably more, I've learned it from observing other very successful mentors, is really elevating other people's work, and showcasing other people's work, and somehow, and that's something I did, as we has kind of taken on my mantle when I left with the Hampton Roads Adaptation Forum. That was one thing that I really, always strove to do, was to bring in, folks, to showcase, lessons learned from other areas, lessons learned from, uh, also within our own community as well, but really showcase, all of the great work that is happening. And sometimes you never know, like, when you introduce, two people, whether it's through them doing a presentation. I do that now, but more on a virtual, webinar kind of thing. But when you introduce those two people, sometimes you don't know what happens later, but sometimes you find out, hey, look, that person, got that opportunity to do a project, and it's this fabulously successful project. So that kind of, I try to put people together. I try to be a connector, as well as a collaborator, and I don't even have to be in it after I've connected them. I'm like, I can step out, they can go on and do their great work. So that's kind of how I do it.
Michael, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just say, I think everyone's so busy with their own projects, and I think, within this field, I think we all tend to get siloed a little bit, especially when it comes to NGOs that are working on different aspects. So like Michelle said, I think very early on, if you can prove, that you're going to provide value to an NGO and working together, you can prop up the work that they're doing. I think that goes a long way in kind of creating those relationships. We've seen a lot of that within our health safety and preparedness working group. There's a whole bunch of different stakeholders within this community that are working on health safety and preparedness in some aspect. We have local hospitals, we have local healthcare agencies. There's public safety, there's a health department, and various other nonprofits that are working in this space as well. Um, So very early on, we needed to figure out a way to show that we can provide them value. And I think by doing that, we've been able to build some really successful relationships and go a long way towards, in community health assessments and, first aid alerts when it comes to climate emergencies. So it's really, making those relationships and showing how you can help with their goals.
So I do want to take this as an opportunity to thank our panelists for their insights and for being here with us, and then to my co-organizers and to the audience. Thank you so much for joining us today.